we're gonna open the meeting for December 3rd. We should do a roll call. I'm gonna call your name out and just say here. Ken,
Here.
Haley. Haley. I know you're here.
You're muted, Haley.
Here. Hello.
Yep.
There it
Haley?
is. Here.
Okay, and me, I'm here. All right, so that's takes care of us. The first item is the minutes from November 19th. Is there any corrections to add to the minutes? No. Okay. Can I have a motion to accept the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Yep.
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor? We're going to do a roll call again. Ken,
Yes.
Haley,
Yes.
me, and who am I missing?
Eleanor
Who did I
just
miss?
texted me that she can't seem to log into the meeting.
Oh. Okay, I can't even see anyone.
Haley, can you just text her when she signs into the security agreement, when you first log on, she'll get an email with a link and she just clicks on there.
Okay.
I did the same thing.
Hmm. We'll just hang on a second then for her to. I'm just waiting for her to come on. All right, well, we've got enough
It's on
anyways
now.
to,
It's coming on now, Jim.
there she is. Okay, so, approval of the minutes. So we've got, Ken, you said yes.
Correct.
Haley, you said yes. I say yes. Eleanor, you okay with the minutes from the 19th?
I had a question on them, but if you guys are good to approve, you can go ahead.
Okay, well, we're gonna
Sorry.
approve them. Yeah, that was our vote to approve them, so we're gonna move on now. First item is 35 Stock Avenue. DEP file 647. Brian, you must be here for that.
I am, Mr. Chair, and John Ogren is here also.
Okay,
If I can proceed.
yes, you can.
Right, thank you, appreciate that. John will share his screen, but we had a site visit last Saturday, and thank you to the members that were able to make it. It was a miserable day. That was the rainy day.
Yeah,
And so it was cold and rainy, but thank you for attending. I think there were some good observations made on the site visit. And John can share his, John, if it's okay for John to share the latest plan.
yep, yes, it is.
Yeah, and he is, and I think, we're interested in the observations. Our goal is after the site visit is to close this matter out and hopefully get an order of conditions issued when the commission's ready to do that. We're happy to address any questions or concerns that the commissioners might have after the site visit, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Okay,
I mean, if you want me to quickly go over, there's not a lot of changes, but there are a couple
Yeah,
changes to the plan.
yeah, go over the plan.
John, can you blow it up a little bit? It's kind of small.
I've got a slight problem here. I don't have any pictures. I can just hear you, but I have the plan here on paper. And just to let you know, I went to the site later when no one else was there. I couldn't make it that day, so I have seen the site.
Great.
Okay, so based on kind of observations in the previous hearing, we looked at adding some bushes. So originally there was, in this area here, we proposed 5 bushes. We're now proposing 10 bushes, and we're also proposing to have common sage as kind of the ground cover along in this area. And that's been added to the planting table. It's been revised to update that. And then we've added for this this conservation seed mix that we're proposing on this existing slope. We're also proposing to add a jute netting over it, and that's commonly used on steeper slopes just to kind of help stabilize it and help the vegetation to grow.
Okay,
And that's essentially the changes that have been made to the plan.
okay. One thing I want to say, we're using a lot of this seed mix lately. More so than we've done in the past. And I think the one thing I've heard about this seed mix is that you have to do it a few times to get it to establish. Is that correct, John?
Yeah, I think it somewhat depends on the situation. I know, I'm trying to think of an example out off of Audubon Road.
Mm-hmm.
We did it once and it came in pretty good, but kind of there were some spots where we had to kind of supplement it.
Okay, well, I would like to propose that we monitor for 3 years and let it, once a year, look at it. If it's fine, leave it alone. If it needs some more, just add some more to it. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Sound reasonable?
Yep.
Just where it is a steep slope there, it wouldn't hurt to, I just want to make sure it grabs. Does anyone else have concerns? Any concerns?
Jimmy, I think that's a good point. If Libby has other suggestions for things that would work there that's steep, I definitely don't want to give the homeowner a maintenance headache, and we want it to be successful. So open to what she thinks.
Okay, so
I mean, if she thinks that that's the best approach, then I'm good with it, but the monitoring thing might be a good idea.
Yeah, Libby
Okay.
Libby did think that was the best, Eleanor, and
Okay.
I think the monitoring is very reasonable. I understand why you want that. It is a steep slope and it will only benefit the homeowner to make sure it comes in appropriate too.
yeah,
And it's not a heavy task to reseed it if it has to be.
yeah,
So,
okay. What other issues are left here to talk about? Does anyone have any comments?
There's a couple of trees that were removed and you talked about replacing them. Do you have an idea of where those would go?
We talked about that a little bit on the site visit, and talking about how it may not really make sense, and they've clearly added some more shrubs. I mean, if they can add another tree, that would be great, but I think in terms of replacing, I think they've got it covered with all the shrubs and everything that they're doing as well.
I would agree. Seeing that area, it looked like it would be hard to. There was a lot of ledge. It would be tough to put in new trees right there. That would be successful. So I'm okay with the shrub approach as well.
Okay. So you're all set then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Is anyone in the audience here have something they want to add? Anyone have anything they want to bring up? There's quite a few people on the list here. No one has anything to say? Okay, if there's nothing more to be said, do we want to have someone make a motion to close the hearing?
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
And, we will have a condition in there about the, monitoring for 3 years. So that's gonna be a special condition we're gonna add. Ethan, you got that?
Yeah.
Okay. And,
Jim, should
I
we,
think
should we
that-
keep closing it out? I made the motion.
yeah, all right, I just wanted to add, I wanted to make sure that got caught in all this that we're doing. So, do I have a second on the motion?
Second,
Okay, all in favor? Ken,
Yes.
Eleanor,
Yes.
Haley,
yes.
and I'm a yes as well. Okay. So Brian, we will get this thing. Is there anything you need to say, Brian?
Nope. Nope.
Okay, so,
Thank you. Appreciate all your time.
okay, so we'll get this, in the works and
Uh,
get it within the next 2 weeks or so.
Sorry,
right.
Jimmy, can I ask a question as a point of order? Do we have to decide on the conditions before we close the hearing?
Well, actually, we usually write the order after we close the hearing.
Okay.
So if, and that's true. We should probably, go over where there's only one. It didn't seem like it made much sense to do it any other way, but we can if you want to.
Do we
No,
have to go through all the, sorry, do we have to go through all the fill in the blanks where this is already done?
Here, I'll share my screen in a sec.
Okay, actually, I don't see how that's gonna matter at this point.
Right, that's why I'm curious.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Oh, sorry, why wouldn't it matter?
They've already,
Work's been
Built.
completed.
Oh.
Yeah,
There's no more
Okay.
stockpiles to worry about.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know how you do this. And then as far as only other conditions, I guess I would just throw this out there. The only thing I saw that I could be a concern, and it's probably not with this homeowner, but I'd want it potentially attached to the property if reasonable and feasible, was some sort of dark skies compliance, just something to keep like bright spotlights sort of shining down into the wetlands and into other neighbors, just because it's so high up. Now maybe that's covered by bylaw and totally outside this, but that was the only other thing I had thought of.
okay. If someone can come up with some, I mean, we can add this in now if someone wants to come up with some language to reflect it, we just don't want them to have the lights shining, 24 hours a day because it disrupts the cycles for the wildlife, correct?
Yeah, and the like avoiding blue light, more like yellow-ish tones. Brian, is that reasonable or I don't?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I understand the blue light concern. I'm not very fond of the blue lights.
Okay,
Yeah, they tend to really, they're striking. So, the zoning board used to put a condition on that it would be a certain lumens, like 2,700 to 3,300 lumens, and I think that's kind of what the soft LED is, if that was an LED light. But if you wanted, perhaps, a condition that any exterior lights shall be shielded from the wetlands area or be dark sky compliant.
okay,
That way, if he already has lights up there, which I'm not sure if he does on the outside, but if he does, he could just shield them instead of having to buy new lights.
right.
Yeah. Well,
That okay.
All right, is that,
That works for me.
all right.
We can probably work on the exact phrasing.
Well, are we gonna write the order now? It's like we don't have a big agenda.
I think it would make sense to.
Well, do you have any concerns about the dispersion boulders? I wrote a potential condition. I don't know if you wanted to. focus on-
What do you got for a condition? Why don't you read it to us?
You see my screen or no? Did I do this right?
Mm-hmm.
Just about observing them and making sure they're working and getting it fixed if it's not working as it's supposed to.
Did you write something up is this?
Oh, you
from
can't
your-
see. I'll read it.
Can you just if you can just blow up your screen a little, Ethan, it's just small.
I don't know what you can see or not. You can't see that?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
yeah, there.
Okay. So the conservation agent shall be able to observe and document the flow dispersion boulders for the duration of the permit. Dispersion system shall be fixed if requested.
Okay. Is this something you inspect at the end of for compliance at the end of the project?
It'll just be once or twice. Yeah, probably just at the end, unless there's something that comes up that makes me concerned. Just to make
Okay.
sure it's like working as it's supposed to.
So does everyone think that wording is okay? Any other commissioners? Are they in agreement with that wording? We could add that as a condition.
Do you use duration of the permit or do you put it like a specific, like 3 years of monitoring for the grass stuff? I'm just not. sure
We
what
could
you're
say
Thinking,
we could just say 3 years so it lines up with the seed mix.
what's
Okay.
the duration of the permit until they get an
That-
order of conditions? I mean, until they get until it closes
It,
out.
it will be 3 years either
Would
way.
be-
Thank you.
All right, so we have two conditions, right?
And then,
Any,
oh,
And
Go
the
ahead.
lighting.
the lighting.
Yeah.
all right, so we've got the lighting,
And do you want to include these setbacks?
what are the setbacks? I don't have a,
Like
I
the
have-
fields, landscape debris, pesticides, fertilizers.
I think those are good just to have, right? Those are kind of standard.
yeah,
Yeah, I
aren't
think
those
they're
a standard condition?
I think they're fine to have.
Yeah,
I don't think it hurts to have them there.
yeah.
Okay. So that's it. Ethan, you've got three conditions to add to this.
Yeah.
So-
So what was the dark skies?
Yeah, I
Will
probably have to
be-
check the lumens. Exterior lighting shall be shielded from the wetlands or dark skies compliant,
Or be dark sky compliant.
or be dark sky compliant.
Yeah, so they don't have to buy new ones if.
Well,
they're
you
not dark.
know what else you might want to add though, is that the lights that would affect the wetland, because, lights in the front of the house, I don't think are gonna matter.
I would
Um,
maybe just any lights on the accessory structure. Cause that's what's right near the wetland.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay,
And not running 24/7.
Yeah, and if you could just reference any exterior lights.
yeah.
Thank
I would
you.
just say, yeah. Any exterior lights.
okay.
And then I don't know if we need like a link to a definition of dark skies compliant or something like that.
Pretty common, Illinois.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
like companies market lights as dark sky compliant. That's like a pretty big thing now.
okay.
Okay, so now we're done. This is the order of conditions, and these are the special conditions we're adding. Is everyone in agreement with this and understands what we're doing?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Ethan,
all
you
right, so,
comfortable with that last one? The dark
Yeah.
sky compliant? Okay.
Yeah.
okay, so we need a motion to Accept
Make a
the,
motion-
the
make a
order of
motion
conditions.
to accept the order
Yeah.
of conditions with those 3 special conditions.
Right, good job.
Second.
All in favor? Ken,
Yes.
Haley,
Yes.
Eleanor,
Yes,
and I also accept it. Okay, so you're done.
Thank you for doing that tonight. Appreciate it.
Okay,
Thank you.
good, Brian.
thanks.
Our next item is other business. I was looking over this wetlands bylaw draft discussion. It's kind of intense. Do we want to talk about that right now? Anyone here to talk about that?
Sure.
Yes.
Who is talking?
Eleanor and I both said, yes, we can talk about this now. And
Okay.
I would assume that Jennifer's here for this.
Jennifer?
Can we?
Give me
Yes,
what?
I sent an email with a letter and spreadsheet attachment that had some questions in it. And just a summary of some what the other area bylaws include as their resources and interests.
Would you be able to pull that up? Do you have that?
I'm not on my computer, so I can't share screen, but I think everybody
pull it up
has a
and-
copy of it.
I'll pull it up. I'm looking for it right now.
Yep.
Which one? I can only show one at a time. So which one did you want?
Hmm.
Can you see my screen?
Yep.
What are we doing here now?
She
Well,
asked
so
some
this,
questions.
yeah, so this is the letter that I sent and with some summary information comparing the current draft. And I looked at the newest draft and it all seems consistent. I don't think anything has changed from, the letter that I wrote in the draft that I was looking at least in terms of this information that I summarized here. And then
Mhm.
towards the bottom, I had some questions about the bylaw right there. So first question was, do the protected resource areas include both isolated wetlands and bordering vegetated wetlands? Oh, sorry, I'm having trouble reading it on that screen. Yeah, so the bylaw would, the first question is, would the bylaw protect both isolated wetlands and bordering vegetated wetlands, where bordering vegetated wetlands are currently protected under the Wetlands Protection Act, but this bylaw would also additionally protect them? That seems to be the case. That's my impression, but that's a question that I had for the commission.
So vernal pool, yes. Sorry.
Repeat what you just said, Jennifer.
So
you're
my
asking-
question is, if this bylaw draft protects both isolated wetlands and also protects bordering vegetated wetlands, meaning it protects wetlands that are already
Yeah.
covered under the WPA, as well
Yes,
as,
it does. Yes,
As-
isolated land, yes, it does.
okay.
Does that need to be
Um,
clear in the bylaw? Is that what you're saying?
That was my impression reading the bylaw, but I just wanted to be sure about that.
I agree. I wasn't sure if it was clear or not. It wasn't obvious to me.
mhm.
I could see that it was defined, but I couldn't tell that we were actually protecting it or addressing it.
Next day.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna add, that like we spell it out about the vernal pools, but I don't think it's spelled out about the BVW.
But this is
Okay.
additional protections beyond the Wetlands Protection Act. The vernal pool, it would have protection up to 100 feet, where right now, unless it's within a wetland resource, it doesn't have protection. And also the 25-foot setback, so that would be memorialized. So the rest would already be covered under the Wetlands Protection Act.
Right, and for the second point, it doesn't supersede DEP's jurisdiction. It's in addition to. It's providing a more conservative layer of protection onto what DEP already protects under the WPA.
Right. So my question then comes in about if the resources listed include, for example, any stream, any pond, that seems like that definition of a resource area protected by the bylaw would just naturally cover
If
the
you look in the
bordering
regulation,
vegetated.
right, if you look in the regulations, it has wetlands identified under the definitions.
In the bylaw?
Yeah. So it seems like it does include because it doesn't specifically exclude a bordering vegetated wetland. It really includes any wetland.
Well, if it's too small, it doesn't cover it. If it's an isolated wetland, it has to be, it has to be 5,000 square feet, 5,000 cubic feet, is it? I don't remember what it is off the top of my
Yeah.
head, but
Right, the isolated wetland, unless it meets the standard, it isn't covered.
right, so it's not covered, so that would be, now you could be being more restrictive by putting a limit on that would be a beneficial thing to do,
So I think
because
that's,
there are areas that we don't have jurisdiction over, and that's one of them. It's federally regulated.
so this, I guess what was unclear to me is in the current proposed bylaw, are we proposing to protect isolated wetlands regardless if they are a vernal pool or not?
Well, isolated, well, it can only be a perennial pool if the isolated land is big enough. I don't know, Ken, you must be able to answer that question.
No, off the top of my head, I'm not, sorry.
No?
So,
Okay.
so Judy, is the intent to protect isolated vegetated wetlands that may not be vernal pools or haven't been certified as vernal
Not, the isolated wetlands aren't called out for protection,
in your draft bylaw?
correct? Because that was never discussed.
Okay.
Is that something usually covered by bylaws for other towns that we've seen?
Some of them have it.
Is there a downside, or is that just being too protective?
No, I don't think so. I think you just have to define what the threshold would be.
Like size-wise?
Correct.
Yeah, because that's a trigger that makes it protected or not. I think it's good to capture that, because like we would have picked up some more information for the vote. If,
Yeah.
there was ones up there that we couldn't do anything about, and if you had something in your bylaw, and we need to talk about how to craft something to make that work.
Mm-hmm.
So this is one of the things that I summarized in my letter under point number 2, under the summary.
Mhm.
Of the 9 area bylaws that I looked at, 100% of them protected isolated wetlands. So it
Okay.
is common to do that.
Yep. Okay.
I think
Well,
we should,
we should do it. We
yeah,
should do it. I think anyways.
I agree.
I
Okay,
agree,
so
as
we'll
long as there isn't a downside, like if that's gonna kill everything. Do you know what I mean?
well, we can make it at our discretion, something along those lines, so that we have a way to back out of it or allow it if we need to. I mean, that's what you usually see on this stuff. I think for Wakefield, I think there's not going to be that many, and I think we should protect what we possibly can because there's not so many. Anyways, why don't someone work out some wording for that, and then we'll look at it again and see if everyone wants to go with it or not. Does that sound all right?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can see what the standard is for, other
That's something
towns. Yeah,
Ethan can work on that. See if he can craft something together for us.
Sure.
Okay. I started reading that thing. I have to read through that bylaw again. There was a lot in that bylaw. And I think we need to go through it line by line almost, especially in the beginning of it. So I'd like to save that for another meeting.
can we, I guess, go through, I thought Jennifer asked good questions. Can we at least go through
Yeah, absolutely.
the rest of, yeah.
Yeah, get all our questions answered.
Well, so my and so I highlighted, so above the part that you highlighted there, I quote from the bylaw draft that I had, which I don't think has changed, and I underlined said resource areas shall be protected whether or not they border surface water, and that's one thing that led me to have the impression that wetlands would be protected whether they're isolated or whether they're already bordering vegetated wetlands.
Yeah.
So my question was just kind of clarifying and confirming that. And in addition, kind of earlier under question number 1, the first paragraph under question number 1, it lists the resource areas, any stream, bank, and so on, which also makes it sound like it's going to cover both isolated and bordering vegetated wetlands.
Yeah, we want to make sure though too that when we do this thing that we're not trying to, apply this thing to like puddles. Someone might read it and, we've got to make it clear that it doesn't include things like, like small puddles we're talking about. I mean, the state's got gives you some areas that you can work with that they think are the minimum. We just want to say that we think we need a little bit more restrictive as far as those requirements, without actually, changing the whole thing. All right, Jennifer, what else do you have?
Yeah.
My second question listed here was would protecting bordering vegetated wetlands in the local bylaw then supersede the DEP jurisdiction of the wetlands? So if a wetland, let's say, is a bordering vegetated wetland, so it does fall under the State Wetlands Protection Act, but the same wetland also falls under the Wakefield bylaw. Does DEP then have jurisdiction, or does Wakefield and the Wakefield Conservation Commission
Well-
have the jurisdiction.
Well, one thing I can say, and Ken can correct me if I'm wrong, but we're supposed to be more restrictive. So this addition to the bylaw should automatically be stricter than what we would normally get out of the regulation. So that makes it different right there.
That's correct. And DEP wouldn't have jurisdiction on the stricter definition that we're providing. We have that jurisdiction. DEP has their set that's in the Wetlands Protection Act. Anything above and beyond is us in the bylaw.
Yeah.
What if it fell within both the Wetlands Protection Act and the Wakefield bylaw?
Great, it's covered.
So-
Oh, I didn't catch that.
I didn't catch it either. What was?
I don't understand the question. If it's covered with both, then that's good.
Right, so then would an applicant go to DEP and say, I want to overturn this?
No. Well, they would, at that point, they probably have an order of conditions and they're going to appeal it.
They can appeal to DEP according to the Wetlands Protection Act. But correct me if I'm wrong, Judy, they can't appeal the bylaw.
They
The
can
what-
appeal, they can appeal the bylaw to the state, the
Superior.
same as, appealing an order of conditions. It goes through the state.
When you say the state, do you mean courts or what do you mean the state?
Yeah, it's court.
Okay, you're
It's
going
listed
to
in
court.
there. It's listed in there somewhere, the exact location of it, but it would be a state appeal. So it's not because a lot of people think it's a local appeal, but that is not the case.
And DEP would have to evaluate whether the bylaw is appropriate.
No,
can-
the
I don't see
attorney-
how that
the
works.
the attorney general approves the bylaw, would have to evaluate it and certify it.
Right. So DEP wouldn't be able to even talk about the bylaw.
No,
Right?
no,
It's not their jurisdiction.
correct.
Okay.
If we're talking logistically, though, I think regardless, it's going to be the same process that they'd be coming to us first, either way.
To get the permit?
Well, right, like they would
Yes.
come to us for either an
It would be
request.
done- Yeah, it would be done in tandem with the notice of intent filing.
Yeah.
So it would be the same process. It would be during part of the same hearing.
Okay, and I thought the last three questions here were, I thought covered with the newest draft of the bylaw. Number 3, I think is covered under the setback areas of the newest draft. It sounds like the 25-foot setback is a no disturb, was my impression from reading it. Question number 4, it also seemed like intermittent streams were named as a protected resource, and rivers. And then the vernal pool buffer zone was specified. So I think those last 3 are addressed.
Okay.
Were there, okay. Hey, were we intending to make it a no disturb zone? That the setback is always unclear to me how that differs from a no disturb.
Well, ideally, it would be a no disturb zone, but then it would be up to the commission's discretion, just the way it is now. The applicants are encouraged not to have any work in the 25-foot setback. But then it's discretionary from the commission to decide whether they're going to allow that. So it's not a strict 25-foot no disturb that you can't do anything. It's try to avoid working in that area, and if not, then provide mitigation.
So does that put us in a situation, and I'm just speaking out loud here, where, you have an applicant who says, well, my next door neighbor is 15 feet from the wetland, so I want to be 15 feet from the wetland. It's only fair,
Well,
I guess I would love.
Every application is looked at individually, so the commission couldn't compare anyone else's anyways. You can only look at what's in front of you. It doesn't matter what the neighbor has done, because that could have been decided based on different circumstances or at a different time period when it was a different commission. So all you can decide on is what the application that's in front of you.
Especially in our town.
Right.
I guess I would love something that's a little more, what's the word? Restrictive. So it's, I guess restrictive enough that you could grant an exemption, for a reasonable basis. But like if this whole commission turned over, for example, and the composition was, 50% real estate developers. I'm just throwing this out there. Like the composition of the commission changes, and it goes very pro-development. I wouldn't want to approve a bylaw where the commission can sort of game it, if you will. Like
But that can happen regardless of whether you have a bylaw, because it's discretionary. So if the commission changes and they have a different read on how things should be, then they can choose in their discretion to allow something that's closer. So I don't think there's any way to legislate against that.
So if it was a 25-foot no disturb.
But that's not a mandate. It's not, here's the 25-foot line, you cannot do anything here. That's not the purpose of a bylaw, because that's why you have variances. Because it's to look at that area, determine the condition it's in, the functional value, and what mitigation could help. I mean, it could be a wetland that has zero value to it. So is encroaching on it, making it worse, that's a discretionary item right there. Is some more vigorous planting going to help it? If you're allowing an encroachment, that's another, side to it. So I don't think there's any hard stop that the commission can make, and especially that would stand up. If someone's proposing mitigation or has, with the lot size in Wakefield is so small, there are so many, if you look at the mapping, the areas that are closest to the wetlands, to the rivers in Wakefield, are more small, modest homes that have smaller lots. So are you putting a different standard on those areas that would prohibit someone from expanding their house, putting an addition, things like that? I mean, that's something that the overall shape of the town right now is something that needs to be looked at when you're crafting this.
Okay, so you're saying, oh, go on.
Because it cannot, then if it's that, then it only affects a certain set of people.
Well, I think there are ways to grant exemptions or whatever, grandfathering, things like that. I guess I'm just trying to clarify if there's a difference in the way. So you're saying whether it's a no build or no disturb, the commission would be applying discretion anyway. It doesn't matter.
Correct.
And then by the same token, if we have a 40B, a 40B come in, can they, like, what would be the tools in our tool belt to prevent them from encroaching?
But
right?
a wetland bylaw doesn't apply when it comes to 40B. That's negated with a 40B. The
Okay,
only thing you can work with is the Wetlands Protection Act under a 40B. Local bylaws don't apply to that.
so if you have a more restrictive bylaw than the Wetlands Protection Act, it doesn't matter, it goes out the door.
Correct.
That's good, because I mean, that's good to know, because I think that's a lot of people's questions.
Right, and that's where collaboration with the zoning board of appeals can really come in to play. Explaining, really making a case for why you want a certain setback or a certain area protected.
Okay. Um,
I did have a couple of other questions that came up after I wrote this letter, after I read the latest version of the bylaw. One question has to do with the regulations document, and there are a couple of places in the regulations document that refer to the date when a property was built in 1983.
Mhm.
And the applicability related to that date, and I wasn't sure what the reason for that distinction, why that distinction was made and why that date.
I picked that date because Eleanor had mentioned having a grandfathering date, and that was the year that the commission achieved commission status. So they had the voting ability to administer the Wetlands Protection Act.
Okay, and what is the purpose of having a grandfathering clause?
For stuff that happened before that date.
do
So-
we want it to go back that far? I think other people have like 1990, or I mean, that's pretty close.
Yeah, no, I don't
A lot
think,
of
I
them
don't
have
think.
some of them have the date of their when their bylaws began, which a lot of them go back to the 90s.
Okay. Um,
I'm just wondering if that would be a concern for people voting, if that might be an issue that people would have strong feelings around, that there seems to be a different standard for based on
I think it would make it more
Palatable.
I think people would appreciate having a bigger buffer. I think it would get more people to vote for it.
I mean, like if your house was built prior to 1987 and it's 21 feet from a wetland, their grandfathered is, that's
Right,
kind of
then
what
they'd
yeah.
still be held to the Wetlands Protection Act. So you could still say, I mean, you still have discretion up to 100 feet under the Wetlands Protection Act. So if you could make a case for why there shouldn't be any increased encroachment. I mean, applicant always has the opportunity to appeal. So that's the difficult thing, because winning on appeal with DEP is enormously difficult.
Okay. I guess the only risk I have, and I'm just throw this out there, is if could somebody come in and say, oh, there was a shed, I don't know, there was a shed, there, I had a garage in this area before 1987. I'm going to put it back.
No, it's,
Also says this bylaw shall not apply to the repair, renovation, reconstruction, extension, or improvement.
Perfect, perfect.
Right, but that's the case now. Someone can come in and say, what grade of disturbance is it, because it's already been here. So I don't think that's a change. I mean, that's a reason that they have findings under the Board of Appeals. If something's existing, they can argue the case that there's not going to be a greater disturbance. It's not a greater change.
Hmm.
And that's something if they wanted, if they were 21 feet from the wetland and wanted to do an addition, then either it would have to be a replication that mitigation that the commission felt was sufficient, or the applicant could take their chances. And I mean, I just go back to it's very difficult to deny a project going up against the state. It's virtually impossible unless it's something wholly egregious.
Okay. Je- Jennifer, did you have more questions?
I have one other question, and that was in the regulations document. The last page concerning waivers, and there are these A through D considerations for obtaining a waiver, and I was just wondering, would those all have to be satisfied, or is it just sort of the cumulative impression of the commission in response to the answers to all 4 of these?
It wouldn't be, it would just be the options.
Okay. And in relation to number C there, if replication was allowed, would the commission consider monitoring of a replicated wetland?
Well, it has to be monitored for 3 years anyways.
Okay. Okay, those are my questions.
I think that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Sorry, I had a question.
Yep.
Judy, and I can't, sorry, I'm looking for it now, which draft it was in. Maybe in the definitions, the way it was phrased, it almost sounded like you only need a permit within, if you're doing work within 25 feet. But
Under the
Of a res-
bylaw. Right.
don't we, but that's less restrictive than the Wetlands Protection Act, don't we?
No, if they're, right now your policy is 25 feet, no disturbance. So this bylaw would have an extra layer of protection. Because right now, a policy is very appealable. And that's why the talk about the bylaw has been going on forever, the 25 feet. You do have discretion up to 100 feet. But a bylaw adds an extra layer of protection.
No, I think it was in how you phrased it. Sorry, I'm having trouble opening it. It was phrased like, this bylaw shall apply to work within, that you need a permit. It didn't sound like the permit applied to 100 feet from the resource area.
Well, because the bylaw is specific to the last 25 feet, because that's what the commission wanted, that extra protection for that 25-foot setback. It doesn't have anything to do with the Wetlands Protection Act.
I'll have to find the passage. Is that,
I think that's where the resources are listed.
sorry, what page?
So it's like page 1 in the regulations.
So
It's right at the beginning.
Are you asking in the
On
bylaw?
the proposed bylaw, it's on page 2 under jurisdiction.
Oh, no, I was talking.
The
Oh,
Page 2.
okay, jurisdiction. Sorry, Judy, I'm not trying to like pick. I just was understanding it to be less restrictive than the Wetlands Protection Act. That's why I wanted to pull up the phrasing. Okay. Yes, because don't we say, like in the Wetlands Protection Act, it says nobody should do any of these things within 100 feet of a wetland without obtaining a permit?
Right. But unless you have concrete evidence of why there's going to be an impact under the Wetlands Protection Act, it's difficult.
why there's an impact, why an activity in the buffer zone is going to directly impact your resource area, which
Correct.
is the wetland.
Thank you, Ken.
And that's I don't want to bring up old projects, but you whatever happens in that buffer zone,
Mm-hmm.
they could do whatever they want in the buffer zone. as not whatever, but as long as it doesn't affect the resource area. That's the whole point of the buffer, right? So this is adding more of a layer of protection within that buffer zone. Does that make sense?
I know that's what we want to do. Sorry, the way I was interpreting it was almost saying in Wakefield, I was reading it as in Wakefield, I didn't read this as only limited to the buffer zone. I was interpreting it as essentially the Conservation Commission is only going to get involved if you're working, and you need a notice of intent if you're working within 25 feet of a resource area, which
No,
is less restrictive.
Right. This is talking about jurisdiction of just the bylaw. That doesn't mean that you don't have jurisdiction under the Wetlands Protection Act. So if you go to 100 feet, there's still the overarching protection of the Wetlands Protection Act. You would have to potentially come to us with a RDA or NOI or whatever. But when it's defined in this document, this is only pertaining to that bylaw specifically. Judy, correct me if I'm wrong.
You're right.
Okay.
So I think one implication of this is that the wetlands that are not protected under the State Wetlands Protection Act, the isolated wetlands, would have a buffer zone of 25 feet for a notice of intent, but the BVWs would still have the 100 feet under the Wetlands Protection Act.
The isolated wetlands that aren't federally protected would have protection under the bylaw, yes.
Of 25 feet, but not 100 feet.
Isolated wetlands don't have any protection unless they meet the criteria. If they don't meet the criteria, they can be an isolated wetland. They have no protection under the Wetlands Protection Act.
Right.
So the actual isolated wetland is now being protected, as is a buffer to that isolated wetlands. So alternatively, in the Wetlands Protection Act, the wetland is not protected federally, and there's obviously no buffer. So this is adding the actual protection to the resource, to the isolated wetland and adding a 25 buffer. So are you saying there should be a greater buffer to be more consistent with BVWs?
I'll say from the bylaws that I reviewed, the 9 area bylaws, 8 of the 9 do 100 feet or more, and
Okay.
1 did 10 to 25 feet.
Interesting.
And that's in the table.
Yeah, I don't know how 100 feet would work in Wakefield, though.
I don't think that's really reason, that's,
Not for an isolated. And I think I'd like Jim said, I think it's going to be a very limited case with their isolated wetlands.
I mean, that's a project we could do this spring. Let's go around and find all the vernal pools and get them certified.
Certified. We should.
I mean, there's not that many, really.
No.
Put that on our list.
I'm still stuck reading this. Okay, thank you so much for explaining, Judy and Ken. So,
Can I ask a new question on this? And I think it would be directed towards Judy. Where it's talking about consultant fees as provided by WPA, would that section actually be necessary to be written out in the bylaws if it's included from the Wetlands Protection Act?
It's not under the Wetlands Protection Act, but MACC, it's under the, what is that, Chapter 40, the open space bylaw. MACC recommended it be memorialized in the bylaw. You already have that ability. You don't need a bylaw, but they suggested housing everything in one document.
Mhm.
So it's
Okay.
consistent.
I think, I know you guys haven't talked about this before, but after visiting a couple properties recently, I think we could do more protection or kind of expand the protection of banks. And I think when I looked through MACC, I don't know if, I think Jennifer might have pointed that out in her spreadsheet that other towns sort of addressed bank, but that, you know, if they're especially steep or whatever, that it says in the Wetlands Protection Act, commissions have discretion to take that into consideration, you know, if it's upland, but it's very steep.
Yeah.
But you can, there are bylaws that specifically say, you know, kind of protect banks and steep banks, like if they're more than like a 1-to-4 ratio or something like that.
What additional protections do they give them?
I think it just treats it like a resource area. Like you'd want to be
But
set
it's
back.
a resource area now.
Well, let's think about like the two most recent hearings we have, like that spot above, you know, behind the cemetery. We had disagreement over where the bank was exactly. Was it the top?
Right.
You know, it was pretty vertical. So, and I think we could all agree if somebody was going to be digging and regrading there, that could impact, you know. So do you want to have more protections there? Like in that situation, it was pretty much a straight drop to the resource area. So, you know, having a little buffering there. And it was also quite similar at that other property on Stark Ave. It was a very big drop to the wetland. And you wouldn't want to have a person sort of change, like regrading and changing that.
But that wasn't a bank, was it? Out on Stark Ave? Was there a stream there?
No, there
I
wasn't.
guess they were not like more like a cliff to the wetland. You know what I mean? It was
Right, but that's not the bank.
I think a more appropriate way to describe it would be a steep upland area adjacent to
Yes.
the bank. So we just have to be careful using the term bank. It's very specific. So I understand
You're
where
exactly right. You're
I
exactly
understand what
yes.
you're saying. There's a steep area that
Mhm.
leads you down to the bank, and that should be protected. But that is protected anyways, correct?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's 100 feet out.
Right. So it's within 100 feet of that resource area, the bank that has a buffer. I may be wrong in this, but I think that has a buffer zone. The banks have a buffer zone.
The banks do have a buffer zone.
Right.
But
So that area is protected at 100 feet. So I guess the question is what could be done to protect it more? And I understand what you're saying. I'm not saying you're wrong or bad or anything. So I'm just wondering what else can be added to further protect that area adjacent to the bank.
But like you said before, it's if there's a chance of an impact to the resource. So having enhanced plantings, things like that, which is usually the course that the commission takes. I mean, there's not always a lot you can do when there's a steep drop off somewhere.
So it's
Yeah,
already,
you
it
can
should
see
already
things
be
like-
considered in our regular
Right,
review
right.
outside of a bylaw.
See, I thought I'd seen a good one in the MACC handbook, but this is an old one. I think Jennifer has her hand up. I don't know if she has anything to add to that.
I was just gonna say, going back to the question about the 25-foot buffer, if there's potential confusion where somebody, there's a risk that somebody would think that the threshold for a notice of intent is always 25 feet as opposed to sometimes 25 feet, sometimes 100 feet. I wonder if it would make sense to reference the Wetlands Protection Act in that section. And I was just looking through the bylaw and the regulations just to see where it's, I know it is referenced kind of throughout the document, but I wonder if that would be a good place to reference it. I mean, I know an attorney would not, I know an attorney would be aware of the Wetlands Protection Act, but somebody representing themselves, you know,
Right, but
making her.
if they submitted an application for the bylaw, then it would be automatically turned back for a notice of intent filing as well. It's not like something could get through for just the bylaw. Because
Well, but I guess the case I'm thinking of, if someone doesn't realize that the Wetlands Protection Act applies, but only thinks the bylaw does. And therefore doesn't submit a notice of intent.
Right, and if they didn't submit a notice of intent, when they turn in the bylaw, they would be told you need a notice of intent. The bylaw wouldn't be accepted without the notice of intent.
But
But they may think that the bylaw doesn't apply and they may just do the work without submitting anything.
Right, but that's where the agent reviews it and say, if it's work that's in the 25-foot buffer, then that would trigger the bylaw.
But how would the agent know to review it if no one submits anything, I think is the question.
Yeah, but
No.
that's the case with any project of ours, right?
Right.
Which we just saw after the fact.
But people
So
can
if
submit
someone,
work all the time, and that's where the first line is when it's turned into the agent. You know, if Ethan got just a bylaw application, then he would certainly just have a conversation with them and give them the full picture of what they would need.
Is there a discussion or about how this is a bylaw above and beyond and referencing the Wetlands Protection Act? Does that kind of get described anywhere, or is that not appropriate for this type of thing?
I don't know if it's, I mean, it could be. I don't really know if it's described that way in others.
Okay.
I think I've seen that. I'm not sure, but I'm happy to look. But yeah, like a case where somebody reads the local bylaw and they say, okay, well, I'm planning on doing work that's 60 feet away. So according to the local bylaw, I don't have to submit an NOI, and then they just do the work.
But they wouldn't get a building permit either. Because there's a sign off for conservation that all the permits have been received. So if they didn't get a building permit, then sure, they can, I mean, that's what happened tonight. I mean, that's true with variances too. The building inspector isn't going to necessarily go through one by one and say, do you have this, this, this? You know, when an applicant comes in, they have a responsibility too. And I think the problem is more, people don't realize that there are wetlands on their property until they go to get a building permit, and then they find out.
So would someone have to explain to the building department that the bylaw doesn't supersede, or, you know, that the Wetlands Protection Act still applies? They would still have to go through the whole process, bylaw or no bylaw?
I don't think so, but
Just as an education thing, so
Yeah.
there's no confusion,
no, I
you know
think
what I
that's a
mean?
good idea.
yeah, I find it very confusing, the difference between the bylaw and the Wetlands Protection Act, and that, you know, which is sort of which. I didn't appreciate that there were two different filings.
So I'm looking at Linfield's regulations, and their first paragraph of their bylaw says, this bylaw is intended to utilize home rule authority of this municipality to protect additional resource areas for additional values with additional standards and procedures more protective than those of the Wetlands Protection Act, Massachusetts General Law 131, Section 40. So they say it right there in their first paragraph.
I think that's helpful.
Would that hurt, putting that there?
I think
Judy,
it belongs there.
No,
I think it solves this conversation.
Yeah.
Right. Is that it for now?
You want to move
Jennifer?
on from this conversation?
Well, just, we could talk about beaver management for a couple of minutes. And how about the trail steward
Sure.
discussion? I'd like to hear that.
Well, do we want any follow-ups from this or?
On this?
Yeah.
Yeah,
like
I'm gonna go
Judy-
back then.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Take a,
oops, sorry.
no.
For the
Yeah, I
beaver
think we-
discussion, I think we were all okay with it, except Jimmy wanted to take us another look at it.
Yeah, which I haven't got around to.
I think there's an upcoming meeting, Jimmy, for the Board of Health. So
Yeah.
in December, well, now it's December. So Judy, I don't know how that impacts things. Ideally,
I don't know if they have a December meeting. I reached out to them after the last
Oh.
meeting and asked for time on the next meeting, and I haven't heard back yet. Sometimes they don't have December meetings, so I
oh,
think.
right,
they'll
and it might be
probably-
right.
Yeah, I
right
think
before
they're probably
Christmas.
waiting to see if they have anything for their agenda.
Mhm.
Okay. If they don't meet as often as we do, so it'd be good to make a move so Judy's empowered to have that meeting.
Okay.
Oh, am I expected to go to the meeting? Because that's the,
Well, let's just let's discuss what were people thinking.
I thought we were trying to get as many of us as we could.
well, you can't have more than two, because then it's a quorum.
Yeah.
Even though it's
No, it's
a
considered a
town
public hearing.
meeting and it's on their agenda.
No,
When is their meeting?
you'd have to have two, you'd have to advertise it as a public meeting for the Conservation Commission. It would have to go through all the same process. You could do that, but you'd have to go through that process.
What is the date for their Board of
I
Health
don't
meeting?
know. I haven't heard back. I'm
Okay.
guessing they're not meeting in December, so it wouldn't be till January, but I don't know that for
Okay.
sure.
Okay.
They usually meet I don't know if it's the third or the fourth Wednesday in the month.
Jimmy, did you have concerns that maybe Judy could address, like in the policy?
What, for the beaver stuff?
Yeah.
I basically want to talk to them and see what they're willing to do.
Right.
I want to see what they're, we've never been able to really communicate. And I mean, they may say, well, I'm not going to do any of that stuff. Or, they might just cut us right down and say that they're not going to do it. Or they may just say, well, let me work with you. I don't know.
Right,
They're
but
new, they're
you
new in
want to-
town.
do you want to approve the policy and then you can say, this is our policy, we'd like to work together? If they don't, they don't.
You think that's the best way to go?
I think so. It wasn't like a hard policy. It was like these are the things we think you should do. Here's best practice.
Yeah.
Take pictures, record the property. Like it was pretty.
Yeah, but I think that's all stuff that we need to do, not them.
Right, but that's all the policy says. You can't
Yeah.
tell them what to do. You're gonna tell them what you're going to do and ask them
Okay.
to collaborate. That's, all you're asking them is to collaborate. You're not
All
telling
right.
them to do anything. If they want to take pictures, that's fine, but you're looking for consistency in the reporting. And they
Right.
have to be, they don't have to agree with that. They can say
Yeah.
whatever we want, that's fine.
But it
Yeah.
definitely looks good if we have a policy and we say, I don't know, Judy, if you want to pull it up and share your screen, but I think,
Yeah, pull Pull it up for a minute if you can. Good.
They're,
We talking about the
Parts.
beaver policy still? I have
Yeah.
it.
yeah, we probably needed to close one thing before we move to the other. I think, later on over in process, you talked about, I read this a few weeks ago, going to the site, like inspecting the site and making sure, the requirements of, okay, the property's at risk. You had a couple of elements there, that an expectation that somebody's actually visiting and looking.
Right, and that, I mean, it's up to them to declare the public health emergency. So
Right.
the commission doesn't have any say over that. If they don't agree with it, then that's too bad. They can't overrule what the Board of Health says. So if they decide that flooding, 60, 70 feet from the house is a public health emergency, they can make that decision. I mean, it's clear in the state guidance what the flooding extent should be. And also if an area is in bordering land subject to flooding, so there's an expectation that your yard is going to be flooded. If you know the extent of bordering land subject to flooding on that property, then you could make an argument, well, this is an area that's expected to flood. I mean, that doesn't mean they should be subjected to flooding because of the beaver dam, but it's things like that that the commission can look at. And then the other question is the removal of the dams, because it's been generally the DPW and the engineering department have taken that on. And I don't think that's going to happen moving forward if there are going to be a lot more. And even more to the point, when you look at along, especially just for example, Water Street, the river is mainly on DCR property. So what should happen is if the homeowner, if it's outside of trapping season, even if it's inside of trapping season, wherever the dam is, whoever is going to remove it needs permission from that property owner. So in order for a dam to be removed in a lot of these areas, you'd need permission from DCR. And actually they should be the ones, I mean, they could be the ones that would remove them. I don't know that homeowners would be too crazy about, undertaking the cost of a removal company, because those are pricey. But it's something that I don't know that the town is going to keep taking on, because it's a lot of man hours for them and bringing equipment out there, and it really hasn't been a problem lately, thankfully. I mean, there are always questions in that area because the water level is so high and the Saugus River is in terrible condition. But that's nothing that Wakefield can fix on their own. And the people that live adjacent to a river, I mean, you need to have some expectation that there's going to be water. So I think what the commission is to look at in this policy is how do they want to document it? I think making a site visit, getting a water level, seeing where bordering land subject to flooding is, making sure the dam removal is done in increments so there's no downstream flooding, things like that. I mean, that's what the commission can control. Anything else, they don't have a say in. And that's why I think working collaboratively with the Board of Health would help. So that when someone goes and looks at the descriptions of what has happened, they at least match. They don't have to be identical, but they should match. And I think it's helpful for both the Board of Health and the Conservation Commission to have pictures so that when they get same complaints from the same people, they can look back at it and say, this really isn't due to the beaver activity. This is just a result of rising water levels or whatever it is. It helps for the future complaints. Because there was a run probably, I don't know, at least 10 years ago, where they were removing a lot of dams at the same time. It was just a very high water season. And they removed a bunch and it was just awful.
And the beavers too.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. That's what's left out of the conversation. And I mean, that's not really within the commission's purview. It's about the alteration to the wetland, which is the dam removal.
Right.
It's an, yeah.
It's, and all removal is lethal. They can't relocate these animals.
Right. No, they have to be euthanized humanely, which is always the case, which is another thing you have no control over. But I think it's
No.
an important thing to point out the start to finish with a homeowner. This is what's going to happen. In order to do the dam removal, if there are beavers, it means the entire family gets taken, which could be 8, 10, however many are there. It has to be the entire family, and they all get exterminated.
And then a new beaver moves in.
Right,
Well,
sometimes.
that's what happens, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't always happen, and part of it is about a better education of how people can, I mean, certainly no one wants to get flooded out. I understand that. But if there are trees that could be removed that aren't appealing to the beaver, you know, there are things, ways that you can try to live with them. And like I said, there haven't been a lot of complaints the last few years. The one recently was the first one in probably 4 or 5 years, which is good. And I think that's an indication that it's not as big of a problem as it was, because it was there and down towards Montrose that they had a bunch. And that's when they had the beaver specialist come in and do the study.
And sorry, what did the beaver specialist determine?
Just looked at the main areas where there were issues and whether those beaver deceivers could be used. And the areas that they looked at, I think he said the water level wasn't deep enough, but that was probably more than 10 years ago. So that, I mean, that could have changed. I mean, there are set criterias to use the beaver deceivers. So it's not something that would work everywhere.
Judy, I was kind of getting at this the last time we talked about it. Is it something, you know, as the conservation agent, whatever, who's performing these site visits, you know, wouldn't Ethan be in the best position to look at places and say, oh, this is a potential area where maybe a beaver deceiver could work? Who can I talk to? You know what I mean? And kind of
Yeah,
help
I
start
mean,
that conversation.
I think there's more background to a beaver deceiver. I don't think it's something that, unless Ethan had training in it, I don't think that's something you could just make a decision on. Because
No.
there are set standards that you need for it to function properly.
I'm not asking for him to make a decision, but to be able to identify, I guess we haven't had this consultant for 10 years. If you guys have sort of a map going, or you're getting calls in particular areas recurring, you know, that might be the stimulus, you know, for Ethan to say, hey, I keep getting calls in these areas. You know, is there something the town can do, or, you know?
It would
Sort of.
be, the commission would have to hire a consultant to come out and assess the area, I think, like was what happened last time.
Is that what happened? Okay.
And that was pushed by Rebecca because there was so many complaints, and it was immediate that the beavers were taken. There was no, because the flooding was just they were just getting more complaints. And I don't know how much flooding was actually happening. Sometimes one neighbor calls and 5 neighbors call, and
It's, you know, some of these areas are really flat where they're flooding, and you
right,
could have an inch of water there and it looks like you got a lake.
yes, right.
So that's a little bit of a problem, but I think Judy's got the right idea. Those regulations that that you guys gave me for the state's requirements for the beavers, there's a lot of bookwork to, you know, a lot of data we've got to collect, I think, and so we should set up some type of a form based on what they're recommending in that state paper, and gets ready to implement something if we had to. You know, I think that's makes sense to me.
Right, because I think even if the Board of Health doesn't want to implement a similar, I don't think that should.
Yeah, you know, I could take I'll go to the Board of Health meeting, and if we get something put together, just like a you know, a list of items to go down that you have to check off.
Eleanor
One thing
made,
I think,
Oh,
what?
I made a checklist.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
Well, send it along.
it's in there. Judy sent it. I'll re-forward her email. I think she
Okay.
sent it October 15th.
One thing
Um,
I think would be good if we could get a marker out there with like a PVC pipe and put the 100-year elevation out there for the
Right.
homeowner to see, because you can't just go in there and tear out the whole dam. I mean, you have to take it only down to where the normal height was, and the normal height is where the water stains are and the leaves
Right.
and all that kind of stuff. How you figure it out, and that's what you should be shooting for. Is what I got out of that information.
Right.
And
No, I agree.
what?
I agree.
Yeah. So I think it's a fairly simple thing for us to get put together, and I think the hard thing might be to ask Bill to go out there and if we went out there and put a pipe down there, get Bill to put an elevation on it. And I think it would be great for the people, because once they get used to knowing, like they'll see the water rising, and they'll have the elevation to go by and know, they can track it themselves.
Right.
oh, that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
Where would you put it though? Because you're like, how would you
Well, we
determine
have to,
where you would put it and how many you would put out in different areas?
well, we have to say, well, the water table in that area should be fairly close to the same height. But
Yeah.
I think that, you know, I don't know that you need a lot, because I don't think there's too many. I don't think there's that many beaver homes out there. I don't know if
No.
there's any right now.
And you could do it right at the Saugus end of the
Mhm.
on Water Street.
Ethan, when you went out with Elaine, which way did you guys go?
Just onto Water Street around like 319, I think.
Do you want to share a map?
They were
I-
down near Jim Ross's house, Jim. I think that's
Oh,
Like
5.
between there and Wiley Street.
okay. So
Yeah.
you were in the next town.
Well, no, it goes back. You have Wiley Street there. You had some complaints as well.
Oh,
So
yeah.
stretch
Yeah.
from Wiley.
Street.
Yeah,
Okay.
because
Well,
if they had taken the dam out, maybe they got more flooding from that.
yeah. Yeah.
Do you need the elevations? Do you need the actual elevation against something, or do you need like something relative, like water's higher than usual or higher than
Well,
ever recorded?
You can do that. I think it would be key to have the elevation. If it's, a 100-year elevation out there,
Okay.
I think there could be nothing more visual than seeing that 100 elevation mark on a pipe and know where the water's coming at some point,
Okay.
going to sludge out. I think it's a good way to go.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Is there any way we could there's any projects kind of in the area, like Hayes is in the area and we know they're going to have a surveyor.
That's a great idea. That's a great,
Hey, can you put one maybe or like just off the corner of our property, just
yeah,
as reference?
yeah,
That way DPW or engineering can go off
yeah,
of that and not have to set
yeah,
up their own stuff.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know if it's possible, but
No, that's possible.
In the flooding study that the town did, they must have studied that area. So I wonder if there's still a pipe left from when they were doing the elevations for that study.
Maybe.
I don't think it was taken out.
Yeah, in theory, they should have benchmarks kind of all
Right,
over the place that
right.
they can come off of.
Yeah, yeah.
In theory, I just see that being a pushback.
Mm,
And like I
Yeah.
have a piezometer in my wetland that I track the elevation
Yeah.
of the water. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
just didn't know if it was hey, it's higher than it ever was versus 100-year, but that makes
Yeah.
sense to me.
But the
Okay.
criteria for the Board of Health is, it's supposed to, the flooding criteria is flooding the house. And that's it, in that area, it's I mean, unless it's one of those catastrophic storms, it doesn't come up to the house. They get more water in the backyard,
Mhm.
Mhm.
but that, I mean, that's at the discretion of the Board of Health.
Flooding of the house
Yeah.
or the property?
The house,
Interesting.
the state criteria is pretty pointed.
Mhm.
It's like a gas structure, agricultural property. But if it's just the sweeping backyard, that's not really considered a public health emergency. The driveway,
Mhm.
if that's flooded,
Okay.
I-
All right, so we're good with that. Let's just talk about
Yeah.
this, the trail stewards discussion. Well, Ethan, is that something you're gonna talk to us about?
I
Or is
wasn't
it-
planning on it.
can you just vote on the beaver policy first before you move on to that?
Okay, yeah, sure. Does anyone have any more comments about it?
I just, sorry, it wasn't quite beaver policy, but I'd be curious where Ethan and Elaine had walked and just sort of tracking where they, where they went,
Okay.
and if there storm drains along the way that get backed up. And then I didn't realize Lake Quantapowhat, I guess read it somewhere or saw it, that we can control the elevation. So I don't know to the extent that the town lets water go, or if they,
No,
periodically, and if they keep a log of that, because that could contribute to some flooding if they're doing
Dennis,
it.
They do not.
Eleanor,
Right?
not to interrupt, but Dennis knows exactly when he's got to put the stops in. He's been doing it so long. And he's got
Who-
all the experience we need because he knows when, if that thing's gonna flood, he gets the boards adjusted and that's it. I mean,
But
they've been
he
flooded
adjusts,
so many times before.
you're talking about the lake?
No, I'm talking, yeah, the lake water goes down to Payon Boulevard. There's flooding down there. If he takes them out at the wrong time, it just wipes them out down there.
Oh, it floods them. So I didn't
Yeah,
even know
but
he does okay, interesting, okay.
yeah. So, he takes care of that and he does a good job. I don't think we need to second guess him. So
Okay,
getting back to the trail stewards, I'm interested
Can you just vote on the policy first?
oh, that's right. All right, so I need a motion to
Motion to
approve the
approve
policy.
the beaver policy.
All right, do I have a second?
second,
Okay, all in favor? Eleanor,
yes,
Haley,
Yes.
me, and Ken?
Yes.
Okay. We're done with that.
Thank you.
Can we go back onto the trail stewards
Yes, you may.
yeah,
at some point?
yeah. Ethan, do you
Okay.
want to pull up? Oh,
I didn't have anything on this. This wasn't my topic.
Okay. All right, so, well, I guess we have nothing to discuss on it right now.
well, I mean, does, Ken, are you in the position to share your screen or no?
Yeah, what do you need me to share?
On his report, on the report that the trail steward filed?
Oh, sure. Just give me a minute to find it, please.
Yeah, just a second, sorry.
But you can go on and
Let me see if I can find it.
discuss.
I thought it was excellent, that he took the time to do that map and send pictures. I sent him a comment just looking at the pictures because I wasn't sure. One of his pictures looked like a intermittent stream crossing that I've definitely seen people. It's easy. There's definitely a lot of intermittent streams, and it, you know, you could be walking along a path and then you realize, oh, this is actually a stream. So that was my only kind of comment, like not, you know, I don't know what your procedure is for trail stewards, but I think you'd want to go and sort of walk the path and make sure we agree with the recommendations. I don't know typically what happens when there's trash and stuff. Ethan, like, do you contact the DPW to go get that removed, or sort of, you're kind of the liaison for Guy? Like, how does this work?
I mean, I assume the stewards would just pick up the trash if it was there. Otherwise, I know there's some apps you can use to sort of put it on a map, and people can pick it up. DPW could do that potentially.
But I think you have to direct them to do it.
Well, it's in the, I think it's in the handbook that small trash they can carry out, they can take out. And if it's
Okay,
any
yeah,
bigger,
this,
like
yep.
mattresses, stuff like that, they could call
But-
Ethan and he could call the DPW and they go.
Yeah,
out and-
the intent was if something big or bad or egregious or something that
Right.
Yeah.
we can push on to
Different-
DPW to
yeah,
take
different
care of.
requirements out there, things like that, that the DPW will pick up.
Yeah.
Well, Ethan can stay in contact with our people that are doing, walking the path now, right? Maybe we can just keep a track of it, and now that we seem to
Yeah.
be.
Oh, go on. I did see they just planted this.
Yeah, that was some,
That's-
part of the vote.
The energy park, was that
Mark, yeah.
Yeah, that's the trade-off.
when did they plant that?
I don't know.
Oh.
Probably the same time they did the energy park.
Mhm.
Did the commission give them a plan, or did they just pick whatever trees they wanted?
I don't
Is it in
think,
the jurisdiction?
yeah, I don't think it was, anything that was under the commission.
So there's,
All right.
yeah,
All right, I think that's it.
that's it. But yeah, that picture with the 3 logs, that was the stream bed. I guess. Yeah, so Ethan, do you like give him feedback or any, like what? Yeah.
Not really. I mean, I've only heard from him once and from another steward once. So it's sort of just keeping track of what the trails look like. And if there's any recurring issues, that's when we would address it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And they were asked if they can to do a report, to submit a report once a month. If
Okay.
it's every other month, if it's every 3 months, doesn't matter, just a report and then. And I think if they go out there and they don't see anything, they don't really see a need to submit a report.
Mhm. Okay.
I'll probably recommend him to pick up the trash when he sees it. Just that's about it.
Mhm. Okay,
Anything that's easy or safe and safe.
Yeah.
yeah, yep. Okay. Does anyone have anything else to say?
Do we see the draft order of conditions from Beacon Street? Right? You have 21 days to submit from the last meeting?
Yeah. Next Tuesday would be the deadline, but I'm working on it this week.
But I think all that we discussed at the last meeting and all of that's in the notes.
Yeah,
Yeah, I have it all written down.
we don't usually look at it after we vote on it and discuss it, do we?
You can't
You
change
don't-
anything after that
No,
anyway.
you can't change it, but
You
I guess
can-
I've never worked someplace where I approve something and don't see it.
No, you can
Final
absolutely
product.
see it. You can absolutely see it. If he's got it put together, then you should look at it. If you have questions, you're not changing it. You're just
Yeah. But
making
it's
sure
not
that
some-
everything got included.
It's not something that's generally done. That's not how Elaine has done it.
Usually
No,
when
that's not how
you
it's done, but
vote
I
on
can
it, that's when
understand.
you sort of discuss the conditions. And then, I mean, I don't have time to write it out with the full verbiage during a meeting, so that's just what I do over the course of the next 21 days.
Okay,
Okay, I know in the past, Elaine has sent us draft, like if something's complicated, draft
Yeah.
conditions to discuss at the next meeting. And I think just personally,
But that's before.
that was
Yeah, it's
Then
before.
you already
it's
unusual.
voted on.
If I have any concerns, I can always reach out, but I'm not gonna share the draft if it's not something that you can comment on. But if, like they're saying, if you don't vote on it, you can always discuss the conditions like we did with Butler Ave, where we wrote out the full conditions before voting on it.
Sorry, I'm sorry, I'm not used to this. Maybe we can talk online. I don't usually approve things I don't see, so I guess I always had the expectation, you see a draft and like I heard what was said, I see a draft and I can confirm, oh, yep, it got in, or like I review any other thing, oops, you forgot to add this thing that
But you
that was
couldn't vote, you
documented.
couldn't vote to issue it then. You'd have to wait to vote to issue it. You can't make a comment after. You'd have to trust that the agents are putting in everything that's been the history of the commission. The conditions are set and they trust that the agent is putting in the conditions that they've given. And
yeah,
if it's
but
something
but
like a
Elaine,
complicated-
wait a minute. Elaine reads the conditions back to us before it ever gets into a draft.
No, not
So-
always. No, only when it's a more complicated one. When you give her the conditions, she writes them down and does the order. If it's something that there's questions on, like she doesn't know the setbacks, then she brings it before, but that's before the vote to issue it. But once you've voted to issue it, you
I
kind of
understand that, but
We could be a little bit more specific next time if that helps everyone, just to
I like the
spell it
way-
out and
yeah.
just say it out just a little bit more detail. That way, Eleanor, you could be comfortable with it, and that way, Ethan, you still have time to fine tune it and write it. If we can just be a little bit more specific, if needed, that
Yeah.
might help both ways. But
Yeah.
you gotta be careful because it could take forever to do it as well.
well,
No,
let's
I
think
think-
about this for a sec. We don't have that many special conditions that have to go into these things, so it cannot be a huge job to do that. And there's
You
nothing wrong
can't
with,
vote- You have to have it before you vote to issue it. That's what I'm saying.
we can close the meeting and then we vote to issue an order of conditions, but in that
Yes.
time frame, there's no reason why we couldn't get a draft up and running because we don't
Before
have
you-
that many special conditions.
Before you
And
vote
then
to
we'll go,
issue it.
then we can vote to accept the order of conditions.
Right, so you'd close the hearing at one meeting, and then the next meeting, you would have the draft and you'd have to vote on it that night. But you wouldn't see the draft again, that's what I'm saying. You could see all the draft conditions, and then that's it. So
That's
the whole
that's the
order would have
time.
to be
That's the
done.
time. You can't have
Right.
2 meetings. It takes 2. That's greater than the 21 days.
Correct.
So the
And I
option
wouldn't want to
is
discuss it without the applicant, without the public sort of adding it onto a different meeting. Is sort of just, it should happen when it's on the agenda.
So I guess when it's complicated, and I don't mean to be difficult, because we had this with another project, you close the hearing, you talk about conditions, and then then the next meeting, we review the conditions and the special conditions and we approve it, right? Like that's a reasonable approach that can be taken?
Right, but
If you,
you don't
And
get
then-
another copy after that, that's what I'm saying.
Well, I'd like to see the final that goes out. Are you saying we don't get to see the final?
That doesn't happen. That hasn't, I mean, you can do whatever you want, but that is not the policy. That's not the process they follow.
so you want to
Because
see
then it's
every
just-
order of conditions that goes out? you want to be copied on the order conditions that Ethan issues?
Oh,
I mean, in a perfect world, I'd love to just go to a SharePoint and be, you know, if I have a question, oh, what did we decide on? I'd feel like it was kind of a hassle if I'm emailing Ethan on the weekends, hey, can you send me this thing, you know, that we issued?
Well, for me, it's about doing it at the meeting where it's public and you can have the input and just that visible discussion. There's no problem with me sending you something when it's done, but sending you something and then altering it based on your comments outside of a meeting, that's whether it's allowed or not, that's just something I'm not going to do.
wait a minute, she's not saying, out, I don't get what you're saying here.
If she wanted to,
The way we've done this in the past is that we close out the hearing. We discuss it. Sometimes we discuss the conditions that night. Other times we wait till the next meeting. But then you discuss it, then we vote on it, and then it gets issued. All she wants to do is look at it once it's put together. And why can't she look at it before it was,
She can,
while it was
she
still in
can.
draft form?
but there are 21 days, so there can't be any changes made after that. Once it's
Listen, there's 21 days. I understand that.
right, so if you close the public hearing on the first meeting, and then 2 weeks later you issue the order, that cuts down, because the clock starts when
What?
you close the public hearing.
Well, Judy, we haven't even.
He's got 3
really-
weeks he's got 3 weeks to do
Right,
it.
but the first, so you've
To
already.
write maybe 1 or 2 or 3 at the most special
I
conditions.
got a lot I'm working on. Like I haven't
She-
even gotten to these yet, and we're 2
You
weeks
can
from
you
the
can
last
see
meeting,
it. You just
so
can't do anything about it.
Right,
you
but,
can't. I
That's the
can't just
point.
have
You
1
can
week to
see
do
it.
but like in
you
a
know.
perfect world, couldn't we have it come back at this meeting and we see, yep, like, I get.
Yeah, you'd have to.
There'd be no
wait to
yep
vote.
though. There
No.
wouldn't be any approval or comment or anything. It'd be too late for that if it's already been.
You can wait to vote, to issue the order of conditions. If you wait, then we could bring it up at the next meeting. If you continue that on the agenda, but
You could definitely
if I
see
brought
it.
it up today, it would just be to look at. I wouldn't be able to take any comments for alterations.
Right. You can
So-
definitely see
Well,
it on
wait
the
a
way
minute,
out. You just can't
that's
do
where
it.
the problem is. That's where the problem is. You've got to get it out faster so that they can look at it and make
Jim,
comments.
Jim, this is the first order of conditions that Ethan has done. So I think he can be cut some slack for the time it's taking, because he's trying to be meticulous and get everything correct. So moving forward, if you want to do something differently, but I think piling on this one, I mean, there is a little, he's only been
What-
here a couple of months. So I
Well,
think.
I've written a couple
Okay.
before. It's not the time that's an issue. It's
Well, it's the process. It's the process involved. It's
yeah.
not being
No,
able to
I know what the
comment.
process, I know what the process is, and I understand Ethan is still learning. I'm not saying anything against that. I'm just saying that maybe we have to change this around a little bit.
I'm not saying that process. I'm saying the process of actually voting on it and approving the order conditions. You can't change it after the fact that it's been voted and approved on.
Yeah.
We-
If
I
you
know
want to
that.
see the conditions, you'll have to wait to issue the vote to issue the order of conditions. Like if last meeting you said, let's write the conditions and continue this to the next meeting. That way the clock doesn't start until we have the conditions. Whereas if you
The
go to the
clock,
last meeting,
the
we're already
clock
2
starts
weeks
when you
in.
close the public hearing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it'd be advantageous if we work on the conditions the day we close the hearing. But sometimes that's just not possible. Sometimes we're just too busy to do that.
No,
But
but
it's
don't,
also what I'm here for. What I'm here to do is interpret what you guys want to issue, and then I put that into a proper verbiage, and then
Right.
in the
That gives you-
conditions.
Yeah, that gives you time
Right.
to do what you're the
I mean,
expert on. Right.
sometimes it's best practice to, like they say, I know there's a clock running, right? But people might need to mull it over. I thought it worked very well, for example, tonight that Ethan came with, you know, he went to the site, he had his concerns, so he came, you know, with a special condition already prepared. and shared his screen. And, you know, so we can sort of see that in the action, you know, I think some of the, you know, where it's more complicated, I guess I would feel more comfortable not, I would feel more comfortable seeing a draft of something before approving it. And maybe I can talk to Jimmy afterwards about the best way. And I don't need, like, tonight's was no issue.
The only
But
way, the best way to do it would be to close the hearing on one meeting, talk about what special conditions you want, have Ethan put the draft conditions together. The next meeting, you'd vote to issue the order, and there are your conditions. And then
that
that's
sounds,
done.
that sounds perfect, Judy.
That's the way we've been doing it.
Not always.
Unless it's too
Well,
busy.
come on now. That's, for years we've been doing it like that.
Not really.
Okay.
But if we're gonna do that, then we have to keep it consistent, and we can't just be loading up the meetings with a lot of like nonsense. If you're leaving me a week to do it, then I need to focus on that specifically, not talking about not to bring up whatever, like say knotweed, for example, just on the discussions a lot. We have to bring something up in a meeting and discuss it then and finalize it. So just gotta work
Ethan,
towards
we're talking
moving
about-
meetings
Prioritize
along
it.
faster.
Prioritize the order of conditions to get
Yeah.
it out in time.
So what nonsense, sorry, were we preparing tonight?
I wasn't mentioning anything tonight. I mean, it was a 2-hour meeting with one filing, so that's went a little long. You're perfectly fine doing that, but if we're shortening my time frame from 21 days to 7 days, then I need to work on that if that's what you want it to happen.
Yeah, I think that's what Ken said, just prioritize.
Prioritize.
Yeah, prioritization, exactly. Focus on things that have the actual timeline associated
Yeah.
with them, or your regulatory timelines associated with them.
Yeah. No, that sounds good. Judy, thanks for suggesting that. That's it. That's all I have.
Okay. We're gonna close the meeting. I have a motion to close the meeting.
Second,
Did you give a motion? Someone say something?
we seconded the motion to close the meeting.
Who did? I didn't hear what anyone said. Is the
Jimmy,
meeting?
this is Eleanor. Yes, I made a second. I
Okay.
seconded the motion to
Okay.
close the meeting.
All in favor, do roll call. Ken,
Yes.
Eleanor,
Yes.
Haley,
Yes.
and me. I'm in favor of that. Good night.